Yes, I can see you.
We can see you, John.
Okay, you cannot or you can?
We can't.
Okay, I think someone there turned off my video.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Can you see me now?
No, it's kind of blank screen. It's kind of blank screen here.
Okay, no, yeah, I had it before. Maybe you just want to show my slides.
Okay, thank you, John. So we just had a wonderful session with Dr. Yolanda Brown. So we are moving on to our next speaker in line, John P. Cordell. So his topic is Women in United States Navy, the last of the first. What a wonderful caption, John. So my colleague Yamini will give you a short introduction, then you can take it forward.
Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, please welcome our next keynote speaker, Dr. John. Dr. John is a 1984 graduate of US Naval Academy with a Bachelor of Science degree in Ocean Engineering, a Master of Science degree in Strategic Planning from Naval War College in Newport, and a Doctor of Engineering Management from Old Dominion University. Navy Surface Ship Command Tours, including a wartime deployment in command of USS Oscar Octane, and a counter privacy deployment in command of USS Sam. He was the 2010 recipient of US Navy League Captain John Paul Award and 2020 Bumid Award for Innovative and Inspirational Leadership. That's really inspiring journey, Dr. John. The stage is all yours. Please continue.
Okay, great. Are you able to see the slides from there?
Yeah, we can.
Oh.
Yeah, you're visible now.
We can see you.
Okay. The slides, I can tell you when to change, if that makes sense. Okay, good morning. My name is John Cordell on the first slide, and thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to celebrate women's leadership in the United States Navy. I should start by saying that what I'm going to present today is my own opinions and does not represent that of the United States Navy or the Department of Defense. I'm going to take my glasses off so I can see the slides a little bit better. Okay, so I am a retired Navy captain, spent 30 years in the Navy and have worked for the government for the Navy for the next 10 years. So I am now at the 44-year point in my career, and it occurred to me that that when you look at the history of women in the United States Navy, most of the big milestones that have happened during my career. So this is sort of my own story superimposed upon that of women's role in the United States Navy. Not everything is included since due to the duration of this presentation, but I wanted to hit some of the high points. Okay, I wanted to give thanks up front to, you can go to the next slide, Dr. Denise Krepp of the Naval History and Heritage Command for a lot of help with this lecture. Okay, we have to start out in the 1970s. I was in high school, and about the time I started high school, 5 or 6 Navy women sued the Navy to decide a case where they wanted to be allowed to go to sea duty. Why is this important? Because the only path to success, the path to promotion, the path to higher leadership in the Navy is through sea duty. And up until 1976, women were excluded from shipboard duty. They were only able to do shore-based tasks. They weren't able to be part of the core Navy, even though they'd been on and off throughout the war times in the past. But most of the time, they had been relegated to shore-based jobs. In 1978, the Supreme Court ruled that women should be allowed to serve at sea, and for the first time, women began to populate Navy ships. Importantly, 1979, Senator James Webb, later Secretary of the Navy, published a piece called "Women Can't Fight" in Washington Magazine that basically said that allowing women to serve in the armed forces in leadership positions would weaken the military. He later became Secretary of the Navy and was nominated in 2017 to be a distinguished graduate of my alumnus, the Naval Academy. But he was forced to decline that because of his previous statement. So I'm also going to hit a few points in here that are maybe not high points for the integration of women in the Navy, but are important. So 1980, the year I started Annapolis as a plebe or a freshman, was the first class where women were allowed into the Naval Academy. Accordingly, the class of 79 called themselves LCWB, last class with, and I'll let you figure out what the last word stands for, but it was the last all male class, which kind of sets a tone for the challenges that women have. And when they started entering these different parts of the Navy, that there was some pushback. Okay, next slide. But that didn't slow down a lot of women who became first. 1980, the first female graduate from the Naval Academy. 1981, the first qualified surface warfare officer. I should mention that I'm a surface warfare officer, and I didn't qualify surface warfare until about 1986. So it gives you kind of a bit of the time frame. 1981, the first women assigned as surface warfare specialists, which is the enlisted version of that. We have the first female selected for test pilot school. That's going to become important later on in the discussion. We have the first graduate of the Naval Academy as a valedictorian. So Christine Holderried was our valedictorian, highest grade point average in the class. But again, just a couple of notes from the Times. When you are a freshman at Annapolis, you have to climb one of the big monuments. And you can see that picture there of the graduation where they all toss their hats in the air. And you trade your hat for another hat, and you do so by climbing a monument and putting your ball cap on top of it. Well, our class set the record for the longest time to accomplish that. And part of it could very well be because anytime a female midshipman got to the top, a hand reached down and pulled her down to prevent a woman from being the first one. Why? Because traditionally, the first person to put the hat on top will be the first admiral in the class. So there were some challenges. When Ensign Holderried walked across the stage as our valedictorian, the applause was very muted. Even my father in the stands noticed that they cheered a lot more for the second person, a male, than for the first person in the class. And so those were some of the challenges that came with being the firsts. That's gonna be a common theme throughout this. If there's another theme though that I want to hit is that that leadership is not about gender. Okay, we're going to find that as we broke these barriers, as the first became the second and the third and the fourth, integration became a lot easier. In 1984, the same year, Catherine Sullivan became the first woman to walk in space. And in 1984, a first unrestricted line admiral, Roberta Hazard. So lots of progress in the first decade of women being allowed to serve on ships and throughout the Navy. All right, 1990s. The next slide, please. Oh, can you go to the next slide, the 1990s? Thank you. This is starting at the bottom. Commander Wendy Lawrence became the first Navy woman in space above the Space Shuttle Endeavour. She was the brigade commander when I was there in 1981. She was one of my first classes when I was a plebe. I should mention, when you see something in bold, that means there was an intersection between my career and the individual that we're talking about. So a couple of big ones there. First commanding officer of a ship, 1990. Kind of a low point, Paula Coughlin reported what had apparently been going on for a while of sexual assault at Tailhook, which was an annual meeting of the Navy pilots in Las Vegas. Over 83 people were assaulted. Over 200 people were charged, but notably none had ever been convicted. But it was a wake-up call for the Navy, and we all had to do training, and it's kind of showed that we'd come a long way. We still had a long way to go. In that same year, independently but coincidentally, the National Defense Authorization Act allowed women on combat ships. So that we allowed them on ships back in the 80s, but they were not allowed on combat ships. They were restricted to support ships. And so, as you can see, now we're a decade in, almost 2 decades in, and women have achieved pretty much an equal status with men across the main parts of the Navy. Okay, we can move on to the 2000s. Next slide. And I should mention I'm doing this from a vacation in Germany and don't have all my gear here. So if there's chats that I can't see, I'll when I finish talking, I'll get done kind of early and I can open it up for questions. But I can't switch over very quickly without possibly losing you. So I'll just keep going. But I'll be done in plenty of time for some questions. Okay, moving into the 2000s. So in 2009, We had the second of two firsts. The Navy's one of the Navy's premier warships is the Arleigh Burke destroyer, and the first woman to command one was Commander Holly Graf. She went on to command the first cruiser as well, so a double first. Unfortunately, her cruiser tour ended early when she was accused and convicted of maltreatment of the crew. And so, I guess if there's a lesson there, it's that leadership and gender are truly independent in both positive and negative ways. But she was a first times two. Um, as you probably know or might not know about the Navy, there is a progression of rank as you get more senior, and the top rank in the Navy is called an admiral, like a general in the Army. And there's four levels of admiral: 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, and 4 star. So we talked about the first 1 star admiral on the last slide. Admiral Nora Tyson became the first admiral to command a carrier strike group. That's also a 1 star position, but that is basically the Navy's front lines. Okay, when you watch the news today, you see the Ike strike group over there just came back from deployment, um, shooting down missiles from the Houthi terrorist group. That's a strike group. That is a aircraft carrier with a group of ships flying aircraft, either local area defense or attacking where we need to, or just being present. But that's sort of the pinnacle of an operational naval officer's career. In 2010 was when Nora Tyson became the first person to do that. She has an interesting story in that she says that she was never really disadvantaged or harassed or even any negativity due to her gender, but a lot of people who became the first did. And she felt like a lot of them told her that they had to work a little bit harder to prove themselves to the men that they were working with. So that was kind of her experience. Again, everybody's experience is different because it depends on both the person and on the folks that they're working with. Okay, 2012, Commander Monica Washington Stoker became the first African American woman to command the guided missile destroyer. And this is significant because I served with Monica when I was an executive officer on USS Cole. She was the fire control officer, so in charge of the ship's weapon systems, and then came on to achieve the first as the first African American woman to command a guided missile destroyer. Again, fantastic leader and a great example to follow. Okay. Okay. Next, higher up is a 3 star admiral, and our first there was Michelle Howard. Michelle Howard, first African American female admiral, became vice chief of naval operations. That's number 2 in the Navy. So there was still in 2014 there was kind of still the glass ceiling there. She did feel some pressure and some pushback on her rise in the Navy, but she took it on head on. There was an interview when she took over the strike group, or her job as vice chief, sorry. And they asked her about speaking up to a captain who had been disadvantaging and perhaps disparaging some of the female sailors or female officers on the ship. She decided to take it head on and went and talked to him. And according to her, once she explained the viewpoint of the women, then he realized that he had some bias and he took action accordingly and evaluated the situation and changed his ways. So her point was that as a leader, both male and female, it's really important that you listen, that you engage, and that you accept feedback. Okay, moving on to the 2010s and really into the 2020s, because one of the last holdouts of access for women was submarines. There was a lot of. You can go to the next slide. Sorry, 2010. There you go. There was a lot of opinions out there that submarines were the last place where no women could serve. They're too small. The crew is too tight. The living conditions are, there's really no way to segregate berthings and living compartments. And so for years, it was accepted pretty much that women just can't go on submarines. In fact, you're looking at 20 years after the first women were allowed on ships. 2011 was the first female naval officers. And one of them, Andrea Howard, a friend of mine, has written extensively about this from the time she started until recently. The quote you see there is about her department head tour, which she recently completed. And I just saw on LinkedIn that she screened for executive officer. So that's the number 2 position on a submarine. And so not there yet, but on her way. But here's what she wrote in her article. She said the crew reactions to having women range from treating us the same to making us awkward, making the experience awkward, either knowingly or unknowingly. So I think we've learned the term microaggressions over the past few years. Just little things that people say to make you feel uncomfortable, either on purpose or just because they've always said that way. Um, to showing disinterest, which on a submarine can be actually pretty significant because you really have to work as a team. And if you aren't fostering that relationship, if you're not building that team, then that's not really a neutral. That's more of a negative. And she experienced, and her friends, experienced some of that, or even actively subverting their success. And so I thought that was a pretty telling quote, and I think it shows that no matter where the first occurs, even if it's 20 years after the another first, it's still a first. And for that individual, breaking through those barriers and making their place and building their team and then making room for people to come behind them is almost the same experience whether you're Andrea Howard in 2010 or Nora Tyson in 2005 or Christine Holderried in 1984. If you're a first, it's almost the same for each of you. Okay, just a note there. This was about the time when James Webb, the Naval Academy recognizes typically 5 individuals each year as distinguished graduates. They're typically high-ranking generals, admirals, politicians, people who really achieved a high cultural status and a high in society and made a great contribution to society. He was a senator. He was a Secretary of the Navy, very well qualified to be a distinguished graduate. He decided to decline it because times had changed since he wrote his article. I think his opinion changed as well, but the past caught up with him, and so I thought that was an interesting footnote to this story. Okay, moving on to the 2020s. Now they're falling like dominoes, right? The first uh, Captain Amy Bauernschmidt became the first aircraft carrier commanding officer. Lieutenant Brianna Plahaki became the first female instructor at Top Gun. Interestingly enough, I should note that at the in the news today, literally this morning, was news that the first ever air-to-air combat kill for a female aviator occurred during the Ike Strike Group. So not only do we have a Top Gun aviator now, we have one who's had a mission kill in combat. Pretty significant feat that just happened timely enough, just in time for this presentation. Another significant, back to my alma mater, was Rear Admiral Davis, first woman and first female Hispanic American to become the superintendent of the Naval Academy. So that's a 3-star post, which is reserved for the person in charge of the entire Naval Academy brigade of 4,000 midshipmen, the entire complex, and the training of our future officers. So again, as recently as 2023, another first. All right, on to the next slide, and the second to the last here, Admiral Lisa Franchetti. You can go to the next slide, 2023. I met Admiral Franchetti when she was a lieutenant, I believe, or a lieutenant commander. Her husband was XO, who relieved me on USS Cole at the time, ex-husband, and she has gone up through the ranks, commanded 6th Fleet, had a lot of great tours, and recently in 2023, she was selected as the first Chief of Naval Operations. That's a 4-star admiral position, which is the individual in charge of basically the entire United States Navy. The Secretary of the Navy is the political appointee. That's Carlos Del Toro, also a classmate from the Naval Academy. And Lisa, Admiral Franchetti, took over and basically runs the Navy. She sets all the policy for the Navy. She leads the plans for future shipbuilding and is basically at the top. So the glass ceiling has been broken as far as the Navy is concerned. However, she didn't have it easy. She, in a March interview with CBS, when she was nominated, she said, "Look, when I got to my first ship, I had a captain, a male captain, who told me flat out that one of my goals is to make sure you don't succeed because I don't think women should be on ships." She said, "I just worked harder to make sure that that what he wanted to happen didn't happen." And so sometimes revenge is best served cold. 25 years later, she is now running the Navy. So I thought that was a pretty awesome um, footnote to the way she started. And bear in mind that it takes about 20 years to make an admiral, 25 years. And so really, it hasn't been that long that there were women who had served at sea who are eligible for these higher ranks of admiralty. But there's quite a few up there now, and so again, Admiral Franchetti kind of broke the last high ceiling. Um, Going on to the final slide here, and I wanted to point out that there's still a couple of things that are still out there. Next slide. Yeah, the last of the first. There's a position that's sort of the equivalent to the Chief of Naval Operations. That's the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. That is the enlisted. He has in the Navy, it's like an admiral. In the enlisted rank, you can become a Chief Petty Officer, and then a Senior Chief, and then a Master Chief. Usually at about the 25-year point to 30-year point, and then the head of the Master Chiefs on the enlisted side, and the primary advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations is the MCPON, or Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. And you can see their symbol there with 3 stars. Have not yet had a female MCPON, and like CNO, that position is one that is nominative, so a bit subjective. So there's really no timeline to that. The last one for submarines, as I mentioned, there has been commanding officers of aircraft squadrons, commanding officers of ships, commanding officers of aircraft carriers, but no commanding officer of a nuclear submarine. And right now, according to my friend Andrea, the timing is such that those who will reach that opportunity will do so in 2027. So we're still about 3 years away from potentially, and that's the command pin that you see there, and the gold insignia of a submariner to indicate that that's kind of probably the last two firsts um, of people in the Navy. Um, what's the point of me sharing this today as a man, right? I think my point is that leadership is not about male, female, black, white, Hispanic. It doesn't know racial or gender boundaries. It's about who you are and what you're about, and how you take care of your people, how you listen to your people, and how you have a vision for the future that includes everyone. And so. I thought that it was appropriate to sort of share my story because I retired in 2013, but have stayed with the Navy and watched a lot of these folks that I served with rise to positions of leadership, and it's been awesome to see. And It's a different Navy now. When I was in command of San Jacinto, the reporter came up to me. I was in 2010. We were getting ready to deploy, and he shoved the microphone in my face and said, "Hey, you have female sailors on your ship. What's that like?" And I said, we have sailors on my ship. We all do our jobs. We all wear the same uniform, and we don't differentiate. And so I think that's important as we move forward. That we realize, as my little quote here that I thought was pretty telling from Geraldine Ferrero, that some leaders are born women. And so that is actually all of my slides and what I wanted to share with you today. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm open to any questions.
Hi, John. So, ladies and gentlemen, John P. Cardell. So, what a beautiful speech delivered, women in the United States Navy. You got such an insightful speech. Thank you so much for, letting us know all your things. And the question for you from our audience is, how do you motivate your team in pressure situations?
Oh, how do you motivate the team in high pressure situations? Great question. I had opportunities in both of my command tours. One was to take it to a war in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and once to do a counter piracy operation where we were chasing and arresting pirates. Both of them could have been dangerous. The ship was in harm's way, the sailors were in harm's way, and really there were two important pieces. Number one was we trained like crazy. I mentioned being XO on the coal. When we crossed the Atlantic, I remember the crew was upset with the captain because we were doing so many drills at all hours of the night. Later on, I left the ship and the ship was attacked. and fought through the damage. If you remember the coal bombing in 2000, and that sailor said, "Wow, I sure am glad the captain drilled us so hard, because when we needed, that's when it came to pass that we were able to do the job." So that's number one: is train, train, train. And number two is when it comes time to do the mission, you focus on the mission. There's really not time. You can certainly focus on individual needs and wants and how to motivate people um, due to their individual characteristics over time. But when you are in a fight and you need to fire weapons or defend the ship, there's no time for that. You focus on the mission totally. And then it doesn't matter. I made it a point when we launched Tomahawk missiles to have every member of the team push one button, so that not just one person launched missiles downrange. It was a team effort. And one of our strike officers was Lieutenant Emily Norton. So it really doesn't matter who's on the team as long as the team succeeds.
Thank you for letting us know how focus is very important to achieve some team targets. Thank you so much, John. Thank you for your impressive speech, and it's phenomenal. And we are looking forward to work with you in future as well. And we hope to see you soon in the Miami event, which is closer in USA. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the session too.
Oh, I did. It was great. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's a beautiful answer and very well answered, ladies and gentlemen. That's John P. Cordell. So please leave your contact info in the chat so that our attendees can, reach out to you. So women in United States Navy. That's his topic, the last of the first. Thank you so much, John. Looking forward to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to reach out and connect.
Yes, please do reach out to him on LinkedIn, John P. Cordell. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.